On the 2nd of December, 2020, an Israeli man was doing an interview for a local newspaper. There was nothing unusual about the interview. The man had done many over the course of his career. He covered his typical areas of expertise in technology and space and Israel's military. But this wasn't going to be a typical interview. Seemingly out of nowhere, he started to make earth-shattering claims. Aliens are real, and the United States knows about them. He said that they've known about them for a long time. And in fact, they made an agreement to work together many years ago. And they're doing that work in a secret underground base on Mars. And there's more. It's not just one group of aliens. In fact, there's an entire galactic federation. And even wilder, the man claimed that Donald Trump, the then president of the United States of America, knew their secrets and was going to tell the entire world. But the Galactic Federation stopped him at the last minute, saying humanity just isn't ready yet. Wild, right? Like really wild stuff. But who was this man? Well, this man was Haim Eshed, a retired brigadier general of the Israeli Defense Forces. Hi, my name's Jason Samosa, and welcome to Jason Samosa's Ufology Moment. So, Haim Eshed, who was he? Where did he get his information? And can you and I, as ordinary people who are interested in this subject, can we really give him any credibility? And can we trust that Donald Trump was really about to spill the beans on all of this stuff back in 2020? Well, that, my friends, is what we're covering today. And I promise you, you will come away from this one not knowing which way is up. It's truly a shocker. To get started, we really need to introduce the main character. So it's time to tell the story of Haim Eshed. Haim Eshed was born in 1933 in Turkey. He spent his early years growing up in the melting pot of Istanbul before his parents migrated back to Israel to a rough neighborhood in Tel Aviv. It was there that he attended school and grew up to be a young man. Despite his circumstances, Eshed managed to get a place to study at Technion. Now, for those of you who don't know, Technion is Israel's answer to MIT and is frequently cited as one of the best universities in the world. It was there that he got a BSc in electronic engineering and then an MA in performance research. Now, information on Eshed's early life is scant, but it's probably around this time that he spent some time flying as a pilot in the Israeli Air Force. He rose up to the rank of lieutenant colonel before starting a career in intelligence for the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, in 1965. The Israeli Defense Forces is like the MOD in the UK or the DOD in the United States. It was whilst working here that he got brought into the world of classified projects. He worked for the highly secretive technology group called Unit 81, and his focus the whole time was on research and technical developments. And clearly, his work was exceptional, because within 2 years of working there, he was awarded the Chief of Staff Citation, the highest non-combatant decoration you can be awarded in the IDF. He was also awarded the Israeli Defense Prize 3 times. This is a prize that is given out by the president for significant contributions to the defense of Israel, although the reasons for Eshed's awards remain classified to this day. By 1969, Eshed was 36 and was clearly a rising star in the IDF. It was at this moment that they sent him over to America to complete a PhD in aeronautical engineering. Upon his return, he was appointed as head of research and development for the Intelligence Corps for Oman, the equivalent of the DIA in the United States. He served his time there working diligently, but it would be in 1979 that his career would reach new heights. It was in March of that year, following years of war, that Israel and Egypt signed the Camp David Accords to establish peace in the region. But with peace established, Israel no longer had visibility into what was going on across the border in Sinai, and this worried them. Enter Haim Eshed. He recommended the development and deployment of Israeli satellites to enable them to keep an eye on their nearest neighbor and to give them a strategic edge for any future conflicts. There was a lot of opposition. See, Israel did not have a space program. and the number of other nations who had successfully launched satellites up into space in 1979 could be counted on one hand. Not only this, but Israel faced a unique challenge in their geography. To take advantage of planetary momentum, all launches into space veer to the east, enabling the payload to benefit from the rotation of the Earth. However, for Israel, by pointing their rockets to the east, they would immediately be flying over their enemies. So should there be some technical failure, their best technology would end up crash landing right into the hands of their Middle Eastern neighbors. As a consequence, Eshed had to pull off a wonder of aeronautical engineering that others before him simply didn't have to do. He needed to launch a rocket up into space against the rotation of the Earth. Eshed estimated that the negative impact on performance would be about 40%, meaning they would have to make up for this through sheer innovation and ingenuity. Under his leadership, they built a powerful rocket that could lift the satellite against the rotation of the Earth, and they drastically reduced the weight of the craft by developing new composite materials and super-performing substructures. Even the screws holding it all together had to be hollow. "We had no choice," he said. "To launch eastwards could be construed by our neighbors as an act of belligerence that could trigger a war. We had to struggle both ways with the miniaturization of the satellites and the added thrust to our launchers. Under the shadow of the guillotine, we can do wonders." Quite an ominous quote there from Eshed. 9 years later, in 1988, and with $200 million invested, that's $8 billion in today's money, Ofek 1 was launched, making tiny Israel the 7th country on Earth to develop and launch satellites. It was Eshed's efforts on this program that saw him skyrocket right to the top of the IDF, taking on the rank of Brigadier General. This made him one of only 24 generals serving directly under the Secretary of Defense. As well as this, Eshed was now the person in charge of Israel's space program. In his years overseeing the program, he saw 20 Israeli satellites launched and ensured Israel emerged as the preeminent military power in the Middle East. Now, there are a dozen things that we could say about Haim Eshed that we just don't have time to go through in this video, but there is just one point that I really want to drill home. Serving as a general in Israel is a massive, massive deal. There are only 24 generals serving at any time in Israel in the IDF. Now, the IDF have 170,000 active personnel with about 20,000 intelligence staff, making about 190,000 total active staff. This means there are 7,900 active service members for every single general in Israel, and this skyrockets up to 27,000 when you include the reserves. In short, to be a general is a big, big deal, and in Israel you will have thousands of people below you competing for promotions, trying to reach upwards towards your rank of prestige. The thing is that Eshed didn't just achieve the rank of general, he maintained it for 30 years. And for those 30 years, he was the go-to guy for all things space. So much so that upon his retirement, Israeli media lauded him as the father of Israel's space program. So why take all this time to praise Haim Eshed? Well, it's this guy who told us that aliens exist. It's this guy, the general of 30 years, who told us that the US has known about aliens for ages. It's this guy, the guy who served in the thick of classified projects, who has told us that we have a secret underground base on Mars. It's this guy, the father of the Israeli space program, who is telling us that there is a galactic federation. Let that sink in for a second. This is crazy. Why would he say such things if he wasn't telling the truth? Surely, if anyone would know about this stuff, it would be this guy, right? Well, let's take a moment to try and see things from a different angle, because maybe, just maybe, there could be some other motivation. All right, so what can we make of all of this? I mean, clearly Haim Eshed is a big deal, right? But does that mean that you and I can really believe what he's saying? Well, I can tell you the media definitely didn't take him too seriously.
Haim Eshed is a retired general and a well-respected professor in Israel, or at least he was before he said this.
All right, moving on. Break out the theremin, because this next story is just begging for a spooky sci-fi background.
Now, this former head of a branch of Israel's defense ministry is 87. He was very well respected, at least until now.
He says not only are they real, but the U.S. government knows they are real.
But it wasn't just the media. Colleagues and peers of Eshed also came out in criticism of him. Isaac Ben Israel, who was the previous chairman of the Israel Space Agency, remarked to the Times of Israel that although Eshed is the father of Israel's space program, he just went too far with his claims, and it's really unlikely that human-alien encounters are really occurring. He added that Eshed has been talking about aliens for decades and has often fancied unconventional interpretations of incoherent space signals that most would just consider to be of natural origin. And he wasn't the only one. Dan Blumberg, who took on the role of chairman of the Israel Space Agency after Isaac Ben Israel, also made his position clear. He said that although Eshed remains a serious figure, he'd given a bizarre twist to a broadly legitimate discussion about aliens. Blumberg stated, "I know Haim Eshed well and have enormous respect for him. It's a viable and legitimate discussion, but it's been taken to a completely bizarre place by his article." Both Blumberg and Ben Israel praised Eshed for his creative and visionary mind, a gentle way of simultaneously marking him out as a nutbag while respecting his career. Yeah, but sadly for Haim Eshed, it doesn't end there. Pretty soon, researchers and journalists from all over the world were writing articles and tearing apart Eshed's claims. On Slate.com, an article appeared debunking the idea that aliens could have an underground base on Mars. The author slammed Eshed's ideas of a galactic federation as sounding like something out of Star Trek, and pointed out that actually building an underground facility on Mars would be extremely challenging. The author said the northern lowlands would have far too much calcium perchlorate, and that the southern highlands would have far too little. And furthermore, how would human beings ever get there anyway? We've only ever been to the moon. There are a lot of fundamental logical issues that make the whole narrative just seem completely unbelievable. But sadly, for Haim Eshed, that's not even the worst of it. See, when someone says something wild and crazy that gets global headlines, you've got to ask whether they have some ulterior motive for getting all of that attention. And sadly for Eshed, he just released his new book. The book, titled The Universe Beyond the Horizon, Conversations with Professor Haim Eshed, was published in November 2020, which was literally just weeks before his bombshell interview. Could it be that he was just trying to get major media attention to sell his new book and to pull some big money in? As a man of science, there's no doubt that Eshed would have encouraged us all to adopt the principle of Occam's razor. That principle being that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And in this case, well, it's a lot easier and a lot simpler to just say this was all about selling his book, rather than postulating a complex conspiratorial narrative about a galactic federation on Mars. In short, the book is not definitive proof of anything, but it is enough to pour cold water all over this wild story. And we haven't even got to the question of Donald Trump yet. TV chat show hosts had an absolute field day joking that Trump would never be able to keep his mouth shut about a galactic federation.
I'm more likely to believe that there are aliens among us than I am to believe Donald Trump kept quiet about it. He'd be firing off tweets like phaser guns. He'd be, the Galactic Federation is a total disaster. No one has been tougher on planet Zeldar than your favorite president. I am hereby calling for a full and total ban on illegal space aliens from entering the country until we can figure out what the hell is going on. Thank you.
And surely that is the final nail in this coffin. If Donald Trump knew something earth-shattering about aliens, there is just no way he would ever be able to keep it secret. Well, my good heavens, here we are. It's time to talk about Donald J. Trump, the 45th president of the United States of America, and I want to preface this by saying I have absolutely no intention of supporting either left, that's your left, that's my right, or right, my left, your right, any more than I have an interest in supporting the motion picture Ants over the motion picture A Bug's Life, which really interestingly both appeared at exactly the same time in our cultural history. No, my real interest here is in presenting a delightful twist in our story and narrative. With all the criticism we just piled onto Haim Eshed, you would think that we'd reached a well-earned conclusion to our travels together. Farewell, weary travelers. It's time to rest. Lay down your weary heads. Where that came from. No, in reality, it's time to wake up. Like, wake up. Like, open your eyes, because things are about to get weird. Even weirder than whatever that was. I want to apologize for that. What if I told you that there are some surprising data points to support what Haim Eshed was saying? One of the key things in his claims is that Donald Trump, 1, knew secrets about the aliens, 2, was about to share those secrets, and 3, was stopped at the last moment by the aliens. Okay, now I know what you're thinking. How could any of that be true? Let me just take you back. We need to go back to 2017 and we need to talk about To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science. To the Stars Academy of Arts and Science, or TTS for short, was founded by Tom DeLonge in 2017 with one thing in mind: UFO disclosure. Now, how or why this company began is a story that really, truly deserves its own video. It is just an unbelievable tale of ingenuity and luck. But for now, what is important is to know that 2 key figures joined this group. They are Christopher Mellon, who is the former Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence under George W. Bush, and Lou Elizondo, the former director of the Pentagon's Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. In 2018, they started going to work in a big way, going into Congress and organizing hearings about UFOs, or UAPs, whatever you want to call them. They got fighter pilots who had literally engaged with these anomalous craft to come in and to share their testimony. And the men and women of the House listened. By 2019, the news had already made it all the way up to the White House, and there was so much buzz that major media figures who were interviewing Trump even brought it up with him directly. First, on June the 15th, George Stephanopoulos for ABC News.
We're reading more and more reports of Navy pilots seeing lots and lots of UFOs. Have you been briefed on that? What do you make of it?
I have. I think it's probably, I want them to think whatever they think. They do say, I mean, I've seen and I've read and I've heard, and I did have one very brief meeting on it.
Then, on July 6th, Tucker Carlson for Fox.
You gave an interview the other day in which you said you've been briefed on unidentified flying objects. Are they real?
Well, I don't want to really get into it too much, but personally, I tend to doubt it. I mean, you have people that swear by it, right? And pilots have come in and they said, and these are pilots that are not pilots that are into that particular world.
It's pretty impressive, isn't it? This wild group started by a rock star, making a bit of a splash in 2017, releasing a few videos, and within 2 years, they got the president responding to questions about UFOs. But what a lot of people don't know is that To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences actually had a direct link to the White House and to Donald Trump. See, when Trump got into office, he needed to hire a team of people around him and to make some appointments to fill various roles. And he picked a man called Chris Herndon to be his chief information officer for all White House technology. In this role, Herndon would be running a team of hundreds of people to secure and oversee all technical elements of the White House's operations. But not only that, Herndon was also appointed as a deputy assistant to the president. So an even more senior title that emphasized his particularly close connection to Donald Trump. Why else would he have such a big title? So what's the big deal? Well, in 2018, Chris Herndon left his role in the White House and joined, you guessed it, To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences, founded by Tom DeLonge in 2017 to study UFOs. Yes! So not only was the subject of UFOs coming up through the Congress and all the way up through different media interviews into the White House, but Donald Trump also had a direct link to the group that was pushing disclosure via his former deputy assistant. So we can say with absolute confidence that yes, Donald Trump had been briefed on UFOs and UAPs from 2018 onwards. We don't know exactly what would have been said in these briefings or what discussions he might have had. It could have been pretty mundane stuff, right? It could have been that information was coming up, maybe he dismissed it, maybe it was a 5-minute meeting or a 10-minute meeting, maybe it was just the generic vague stuff that the rest of us were being told. Oh, it's just a craft, we don't know what it is, it could be Russia or China, blah, 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 we better look into it. Boring, dull stuff, probably not worth making a video, right? Well, here's the wild thing. That's not what Lou Elizondo has implied. In an interview with Andy from That UFO podcast in April 2022, Lou Elizondo made a shocking statement. Andy had asked Elizondo if there had been any almost moments in the fight for UFO disclosure, and that's when he said this.
As far as a almost moment, yeah, there's one in particular, but unfortunately I'm not at liberty to discuss it yet. It occurred some time ago. Some colleagues were involved in it. There was a discussion by some very senior people in a former administration to potentially discuss disclosure. And for whatever reasons, it was decided later on not, maybe it wasn't time. I wasn't privy to that. I don't know all the details, and I certainly, it's preliminary right now for me to even comment on it. But there have been those moments where we've come very close to something, and for whatever reason, it was decided that maybe the timing wasn't right.
So let's be clear. This interview happened in April 2022. Therefore, in this context, the previous administration would have been the Trump administration. And isn't it interesting how all of this fits with General Eshed's statements? Number one, Trump knew the secrets about this phenomenon. Number two, he was about to share their secrets, but number three, at the last moment, for whatever reason, he was encouraged to stop. Pretty crazy, right? But wait, in the interviews that we saw earlier, Trump seemed really dismissive of the subject of UFOs, right? Well, yeah, those were interviews in 2019, but by mid-2020, Donald Trump's take on UFOs had changed considerably. On June 19th, 2020, Trump was being interviewed by his son, when he was asked again about the subject of UFOs, and his response this time, well, to say it was different would be an understatement.
Before you leave office, will you let us know if there's aliens? Because this is the only thing I really want to know. I want to know what's going on. Would you ever open up Roswell and let us know what's really going on there?
So many people ask me that question.
I know, it sounds almost ridiculous, but it's actually the real question I want to know.
It sounds like a cute question, but it's actually, there are millions and millions of people that want to go there, that want to see it. I won't talk to you about what I know about it, but it's very interesting. But Roswell's a very interesting place with a lot of people that would like to know what's going on.
So you're saying you may declassify?
Oh.
You'll take it?
Well, I'll have to think about that one. Right?
Pretty weird, right? Pretty damn weird. You know what that interview looks like? It looks like someone who knows something, just isn't quite going to tell us what it is. And we could go much further into the subject of what Donald Trump might have known about UFOs. Many people don't know this, but his uncle, John Trump, was a highly regarded scientist and professor at MIT. And guess what? He has some serious connections to the UFO issue, and specifically to Roswell, the very case that Trump seems particularly interested in. This is a rabbit hole all on its own, which deserves its own series of deep dive videos, which actually is a fitting moment to mention today's sponsor, Red Panda KOALA. 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 In my opinion, Red Panda KOALA makes the best UFO documentary content on YouTube. He has a brilliant video on Donald Trump and UFOs, and he goes far deeper into the subject of John Trump, along with a whole host of other brilliantly researched content. I'm not being paid by him, I don't know him, I just love his content, and if you support this channel, then please also take a moment to subscribe him. He's better than I am. Red Panda KOALA. Okay, back to the video. Let's just take a moment to put all of the stuff that we've learned together onto a unified timeline. In 2017, the whole UFO disclosure movement got new wind with the formation of To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. And in 2018, Chris Herndon leaves his role as Deputy Assistant to the President to join To the Stars Academy of Arts and Sciences. By June 2019, Trump is interviewed about UFOs, but he's dismissive. By June 2020, Trump is interviewed again on UFOs, and this time has a completely different tone. In December 2020, Eshed comes out and says that Trump was about to say something, but stopped at the last moment. And much later, in April 2022, Lou Elizondo says the Trump administration nearly disclosed the truth about UFOs. Now, when you put that all together, it makes you wonder if Eshed might have actually been onto something. I think that's what makes this case so utterly fascinating. It's the complete mystery of what really happened. We have no means of knowing what was actually discussed in these meetings or how deep the law really goes, but we can absolutely say, with confidence, that we live in incredibly strange times. But what of Eshed? What of all the critiques and the book and all the other things that we talked about? Well, about that. It is true that there was a new book released in 2020, but Haim Eshed wasn't actually the author. It was written by somebody called Hagar Yanai, and it's called Conversations with Haim Eshed. So yes, it's about Eshed, and it was done in collaboration with him, but it wasn't actually written by him. And if the plan was to make a massive media splash, and then capitalize on book sales, then why is it so hard to find a copy? Honestly, I really wanted to buy a copy and to read it whilst I was making this video, but you cannot buy it anywhere in English. You can't get it in the UK, you can't get it in the US, and based on what I've seen on Reddit, no one is able to get a hold of it. The reason is that the book was never translated into English. Doesn't that seem odd? If somebody was actually conspiring to sell books, you would have thought they would have made it easy to buy them. In fact, according to the journalist who interviewed Eshed,
I don't think he's very knowledgeable about, media and publicity stunts and all that stuff. He was just doing what his PR person told him he needs to do, and that was to grant an interview. That's all.
He wasn't scheduling dozens of podcasts or interviews. He just did one interview before vanishing, never to be heard from again. So we can legitimately throw out the idea that Eshed was just out to sell his book. What about Ben Israel and Dan Blumberg and the things that they said dismissing Eshed? Well, that's quite easy to deal with. See, Eshed's claims are that there is an agreement between the United States and its allies to keep the whole situation quiet until humanity is ready to understand. So of course, the two previous chairmen of the Israeli Space Agency are going to toe the party line, just as Eshed did before them. I'm not trying to say here that what Eshed is saying is true, but what I am trying to say is that it's exactly what you would expect two people of that caliber to say if there was some kind of cover-up going on. But talking about things that you would expect, where on earth is Haim Eshed? If he is just a crackpot who wants to talk about aliens, why has he gone completely quiet? Every UFO podcast in the world has been trying to get hold of him, and every UFO enthusiast wants to read his book, and yet he is nowhere to be seen, and his book is nowhere available in English. See, if he were just a madman, that is the last thing that you would expect. Honestly, it does look a little bit suspicious. It does look a little bit strange. It does fly in the face of the theory that he's just a visionary, creative madman. But what about the Slate.com piece about the impossibility of building an underground base on Mars? I mean, surely we can just dispense with all of Eshed's ideas based on how absurd they are. But did you see the other news that was coming out in 2020? On the 6th of August, scientists from the European Space Agency released research showing that giant lava tubes beneath the surface of Mars would offer perfect conditions for an underground base. They say the gravity would be similar to Earth underground, astronauts would be protected from radiation and meteorites, and there would be a more stable temperature. On the 23rd of September 2020, scientists at the Center for Astrophysics at Harvard and the Smithsonian revealed research indicating that bodies of water under the surface of Mars could have the perfect conditions required for chemical life. So far from being a crazy idea, the science coming out at exactly that time was encouraging us to think of subterranean life on Mars as being precisely the kind of thing that we should look for. And in general, this whole period in 2020 really was a time of ramping up conversations and news articles and research coming out, encouraging us to adjust our consciousness as to how we saw life in the universe. It wasn't just talk of life on Mars or UFOs, but in September 2020, astronomers at MIT announced signs of life in the clouds of Venus. Do you remember that? I remember that news coming out, and it was just another crazy thing that we learned that year. By the time you take into consideration all of these things, you come away with a very different take on Haim Eshed. He's certainly not in it for the money. His 30 years served as a brigadier general and as the father of Israel's space program makes you want to trust him, not to dismiss him, as Ben Israel and Blumberg tried to do. His statements about Trump fit surprisingly well with what Elizondo told us, and also fit the sudden change in temperature from Trump between 2019 and 2020. But what about all those other wacky things that he said? You know, it's hard to know what to say. I can't tell you what to think. I don't even know what I think. But I think we can all agree on this. What the hell was all of that? Woo! My God. Thank you so much for watching till the end. I hope you really enjoyed it. Please, if you haven't subscribed yet, take a moment to subscribe, like, comment, ring the notification bell. Those little things, honestly, they help me so much. And I promise you, they just make my heart sing. I'm enjoying this whole journey so much. And if you enjoy these videos, if you've enjoyed this, if you have any thoughts about it, write a comment. I will take the time to respond to you personally. And I will always be grateful for every bit of engagement from you guys. There are so many rabbit holes I really wanted to go down, but I tried my best to condense this into a digestible format. You can let me know what your take is on Haim Eshed and the things that he said. And I'll tell you what, if you want to have a lot of fun, go and find the original article. In fact, I'll link it in the description. You can click on it and your browser should be able to translate it from the original Hebrew. Haim Eshed says some pretty wacky stuff in there. So regardless of whether he might have been right on the money with some things, he says a broad selection of things and I don't really know what to make of them. So let me know what you think. My name is Jason Samosa. This has been Jason Samosa's Ufology Moment. And until next time, cheers.